Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. In today's episode, Moshe and I are excited to be speaking with founder and product leader Anat Eldar about the net adoption threshold and how you can use it to rethink MVPs. So let's dive in. How are you, Anat?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I always like to talk about products, so truly appreciate the opportunity.
It's a pleasure to have you. Hey, Moshe.
Hi, Matt. Hey, Anat. Welcome to the show. An interesting point over there. I always try to see, connections and stuff like that. I used to work many years ago with Anat's husband, and I met Anat through just him saying on LinkedIn that he was promoting one of your posts, I think. And he was saying, oh, by the way, she's also my wife. So
yeah, always to reconnect.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, excellent. It's great to hear.
Nice. So tell us a bit about yourself, Anat, first. Introduce yourself, who you are. How did you get to product management? That's always interesting to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks for having me. My role to product management is quite interesting. So I'm currently a product consultant to early and growth stage startup, and I also coach product leaders. Prior to that, I was an SVP product at Papaya Global. It's a startup company in Israel that redefined how payroll and payment works in the workspace. Prior to that, actually, I have a degree in computer science and math. I was an engineer, an engineering manager, and a solution architect for 8 years. And about that time, I was realizing that if I'll be asked at 2 a.m. when all the great instincts working, what is my biggest passion, it wasn't about a new technology or programming language. It was mostly about what motivates people to act and how I can solve big and important problems. So this is what started my transition into product management. I've been in different product roles in the last 18 years. I was 5 years in Microsoft. I also work in very small startups. I was a lecturer to product management in university for 5 years. So I'm so thankful to have my habit as my profession. I always think and talk about product management. I have all kinds of programs I'm mentoring on my way to work. So product management for me is definitely how to structure difficult challenges. And if you think about it, I see everything as a product as well as myself. When now I'm approaching to sell myself to new customers. So beginning the journey of everything as a product, I'm fortunate to be part of it. In my free time, I practice Iyengar yoga and I like to hike. So that's about me.
You echo so much what we're feeling and what we're saying all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Moshe and I see everything as a product these days. Yeah. So, whether it be software or hardware, it's a product at the end of the day.
And I love it how you frame it. If you would wake me up in the middle of the night, what will be the one thing I will be really passionate about? That's a great way to, for everyone, I think, to find their calling, right? So ask yourself this question and then see, is product management really for you? Maybe it's something else, right?
Does it inspire you to get up out of bed? So
exactly. Yes, absolutely. Very cool. So we invited you to join us and talk about the net adoption threshold, or NAT, NAT framework. So tell us a bit about that. This is something you came up with and you are advocating. So we want to understand what this framework is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when companies start up as more mature companies developing a new product, we all face the same challenge, how we can drive customer adoption. With the current tools, as we see it with MVP and other all kinds of methodologies, it's kind of like a bit of misinterpretation of how we can think about adoption. So in a nutshell, the net adoption threshold is a framework that tries to quantify what should be the minimum net value companies should deliver to justify for new customer the costs and risk of adopting a new product. So it's really how to conceptualize what it takes, right? So we have developed a new product. There is a value, right? It's an absolute value. But what would make those customers they usually have all kinds of existing solutions to fully switch from how they're solving the problem today into a completely new one? And this is not a straightforward transition, because it has its own risks and costs. So when I worked with my own product, as well as when I consult to startup founders, I realized that the thinking today is about validating the idea, right? MVP is all about building something verbal to get feedback and to validate the idea. And validation is kind of like could be a bit of misleading, because it's not enough to gather positive feedback. You actually need to move people, right? So how you think about adoption is basically what drove me to define, okay, how we can work with that? What levels do we have so we can identify these risks and costs and really actually drive for adoption, which is the most important thing beyond just feedback. So, and the NAT involves 4 parts, right? So we have the current solution, the way the customers are solving their problems today, which we need as a product leaders, as founders, to truly understand deeply. Then we have the new solution, what we have identified as solving those problems, right? Better than the current solution. But then we have 2 more things we can work with, and those are the costs and risks. So I've bucketed them into 2 main, categories: sunk cost and switching cost. So for a customer to switch to your new solution, there are some adoption barriers that needs to be mitigated. The sunk cost, how much they've already invested in their current solution, and the switching cost, training, data migration, all kinds of things that would allow them to move to your new solution. So you have a new solution, your new value, then you will reduce the sunk cost that the customer already paid and the perceived or actual switching costs. Those are the things that needs to be, you can play with to justify the move. And when I worked with startup and also my own products, I didn't realize we got great feedback. Why are not transitioning, really adopting the new product? Is because we didn't took into account seriously and deeply enough the switching cost and the sunk cost. And we can play with it. We can minimize it, and instead of doing that, we were spreading too thin. We invested too much in all kinds of new features just to think about the absolute value, while forgetting about all kinds of justification that needs to happen for this adoption.
So to put this in formula, I think you have a way to formalize that, and we can put a link to this, you have it very well detailed in your articles about it, so we can definitely share that with our audience in the links. But can you explain a bit what might be the formula so they can see, yes, there is value here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and in order, there is a formula, but there's principle how to implement this formula, right? So the formula stands for 4 components. On the right side, there is the current solution, the way the customers solve their problems today. It could be an Excel sheet, it could be pen and paper, it could be what's not, right? The alternative, it could be a competitor, but it can also be an alternative which is not a software company. So that's the current solution the customers have. Your current customer, your early adopters, which is basically not your ICP. Those are the ones that would be the first ones to adopt your product, right? That needs to be smaller, right? You want your new solution to be larger than the current solution. But this is the left part is your new solution. But then you're reducing for me the sunk cost, the things that the customer already paid and invested in their current solution, software licensing, investing time in setting up the software, right? and switching costs because they need to move. So your solution is basically the net solution and minus the switching cost and the sunk cost needs to be greater than the current solution, right? There is a saying that a new product needs to be 10 times better than the current solution. But what does it mean, 10 times better? So I was trying to take that a step further, right? So 10 times, how can we quantify? How can we break it into more adjustable pieces that we can work with? As a company, we can reduce the switching cost. We can reduce the sunk cost, right? So if we can reduce that, can we drive what's the minimum net value of the new solution that we need to deliver? So this equation will actually work. And when I say work, it means not just gathering positive feedback. Customers will actually switch to my new solution. So this is basically not enough to gather feedback. We want them to use, we want them to adopt. But for this adoption, since adoptions, for startups, adoptions is very frightening. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough time. The customers have all kinds of questions and asks, and we are limited, right? So it's hard for us to drive adoption. The best we can is to gather feedback. This is the common thing I hear from startups. Like, we cannot afford to really think about adoption. It's only about feedback. So I'm trying to say, and for my really, really real life experience, that adoption is the most critical thing. So instead of the feedback, you have these early adopters. It's not your sum, it's not your time. It's really, the bare minimum of those, the specific customer segment. What is the specific use cases, the core use cases? Don't solve for all use cases, not for all customers. The specific use cases that you can deliver with your own resources today that can take this customer and move them. So you need to solve the core use case as well as the user experience, data integration, and what's not.
Yeah, I really like the formula here, and I kind of keyed in on switching cost. So there's a quantifiable element in switching costs, but so much of switching products is psychological. And so I come from an analytics background where building business intelligence analytics tools, people are like, well, I just use Excel. Excel will always be one of the best business intelligence tools out there because the switching cost of going from Excel to something else is so high. Do you account for that kind of not necessarily quantifiable, but quantitative data in this formula?
That's a great example, and thanks for bringing it out. So sometimes it's a perceived switching cost, not actual switching cost, right? As you just described. So I'm used to work with a current solution. Now I need to learn a new solution, right? All things related to change management. This is my current workflows. Now I need to switch to a new way of working, right? So you're moving my cheese. Don't move my cheese. I want the old way to work. So how to work with that? And I think there are great examples how to work with that. One could be a very intuitive user experience. Startup say, if we have a crappy user experience on our MVP, can that work? It really depends. If that will impact the switching, right, the adoption, because it will be too hard for the persona to learn that, so they won't move. So you need to actually be very tangible and understanding what would be the prevention, the barriers for those users. If they are very focused on, doing their own stuff and it's hard for them to learn new things, you need to be super intuitive in your user experience on the get-go, not on version 7, right? But only if you are truly understood this perceived or uncomfortableness that comes with learning new ways. So we can also think about workflows. I used to do 1, 2, and 3, and now you're telling me to do 7. This is not how I'm used to work. You're changing the way I'm thinking. So when you build your new product, think of how you can integrate with existing workflows, how you can bring them in. So one can say, no, it's very advanced capability. Why would I add it so early in my MVP? But if it's something that prevents users, your early adopters, to adopt your product, it's kind of getting to be a must. Otherwise, they won't shift, right? And you want them to shift. You want them to transition from how they're solving the problem today to the new one.
Mhm.
So there are ways to look into it.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's
The
great to
funny,
hear.
the funny thing when you ask your question, Matt, I realized because I had in my mind that sunk cost and switching cost are easy to quantify because usually it's a cost, right?
Yep.
Where my question will be, how do you quantify new value and current solution? Like, where do you put the quantifiable measure over there? And then you were talking about psychological changes for switching costs. So you definitely cleared it out for me that not everything is that quantitative. But
No.
but going to the new value and current solution, how do you how do you measure those to actually make it into a formula? Because everyone can define it in many different ways.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question, and definitely a challenge when trying to implement this framework. So and going back to the perceived value, even brand reputation about the current solution versus the new solution is something that needs to be taken into account. And it's not about switching costs, and it's not about sunk costs. It's about two different companies or solutions, right? This is from Excel and this is from a different company. So that needs to be taken into account as well. So you need to build some type of value proposition that will resonate with your early adopters. So if you think about just to tackle from two different angles, the psychological aspects and the actual aspects. So psychological aspect, if you think about brand reputation, I'm not familiar with the new company rather than the old solution is a well-established brand. So you need to build an existing value proposition and social appearance that will appeal to this target audience, the early adopters. Otherwise, it will be tough. But you need to build your messaging, right, and your go-to-market strategies just to apply for those early adopters, not for any customer, not for all customers. You need to be extremely focused and targeted. So that will minimize your costs and effort, right? Because you cannot do everything at once. So that's on the psychological or the perceived appearance of different values. So let's tackle the more quantified or quality aspects of current solution versus new solution. I want to emphasize that it's all about the minimum net value because we never have enough resources. We are always limited, right? So we are trying to quantify when it's enough to get them to switch to the new solution, right? It's not the maximum, it's not the average. What is just enough to make the tipping point of the switch, right?
Yeah. Not for the 10x right away, but to start with.
Exactly.
Just to get them to switch, just to get them to use it slightly.
Just to get them to adopt, to move, to actually transition from and it's a very hard one,
That's
right?
hard, yeah.
So exactly as Moshe said, 10x is very, generic equation, but you can, you can, play not just with the net value, but also with the switching cost and the sunk cost. You can have a new solution value, let's say 3x, and then if you switch, you reduce the switching cost. If you make it easier to transit, then maybe 3x is enough value, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So going back to quantify the current solution, I truly want to emphasize it. This is the most important thing, because the entire equation is based on that. You won't be able to understand switching cost, sunk cost, new solution if you want to truly, deeply understand how they're solving it today. And it's not just how they're solving this problem today, what happens before this problem in their workflow and what happens after this problem in the workflow is extremely important, because your new solution will need to integrate in the user journey or the user workflow. So you need to understand the adjacent or the things that happens before and after. Okay, so to quantify current solution is basically mostly the most important, the most effective way is to shadow. Go to your customer, sit behind his back, and see how he's doing it today. Don't speak about your new solution. Don't even mention it. Just see how they're solving it today. Ask questions if you don't understand, but just see. If you see it, you know how it works. Then I get feedback from customers from startup. Yeah, there are a wide range of solutions. My feedback to that, it's not that wide. If you bucket it, if you give it, put it under categories, you come up into 5 different ways of solutions, 10. A lot is billions. So it's a very, very low number, okay? And you can bucket it to understand it. So customer interviews, shadowing, truly understand. And since you have already segmented your customer audience, it's your early adopter. It's a very specific group of customers and the persona that you're targeting, excluding the buyer. So you don't have many. Another tip, to truly understand how they're solving it today, the current solution, it's not about getting feedback from many. It's more about the quality rather than the quantity of the interviews. Get 5 customers or prospects, interview them, and those one would be, the persona or that your target customer. 5 is enough. And 5 is enough, and I want to emphasize for B2B SaaS companies. For consumer companies, it's a totally different approach. But for B2B SaaS, you need those 5 interviews, great one, that identified with your target audience to get strong feedback on how they're solving it today. Do not skip that. Skip something else. Do not skip this phase. The most important. Otherwise, how can you put something in equation if you don't know your base? That's your base. Always start with your base, right? Then there's a saying, fall in love in the problem, not in the solution. True, but misleading in a way, right? The most difficult and challenging aspect of building product is not identifying, is finding a great solution. Because they're already solving it today. You need to be better than that, right? So finding a great solution is hard. This is what you're paid for, right? To manage the risk of bringing innovation to the market. So once you have identified or you have clear understanding on the current way they're solving it, the problem that you have identified, right? And the before and the after, trying to quantify the solution really depends on what you can bring new to the market. Innovation is all about new value, right? So what makes your company with your technology and your resources, what you can bring new to the market that will be better than the way they're solving it today for the early adopters, not for in the
not
future.
Not for everybody. Yep.
Exactly. Don't do it for everyone. You cannot. You have limited resources today. Tomorrow, when you have 200 people, build for the rest.
Do it. That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's great. On that note, do you have a real world example of a company that successfully implemented the framework?
Yeah, I think Slack, and I also wrote it in the article, is one of the most amazing examples that actually took the NAT without knowing the NAT existed into account. So if we think about Slack, in their early days, they have targeted small, medium technology companies that had very fragmented communication styles. So they've have discussion all over the place, and it was really tough for them to be effective and productive. So they have built a new communication tool, but they had quite of heavy lifting stuff to deal with in terms of the sunk cost and the switching cost. Those companies already invested time and effort to set up and to work with existing tools. So in terms of the sunk cost. They already invested time in inputting all of their data in multiple tools. If we think about switching costs, now they need to be trained on a new solution. They need to be onboarded. They need to adjust their workflows, right? They used to work in 5 tools. Now they're being asked to work in 1 tool. And also the financial aspect. They need to pay for another tool. They've already invested so much in all kinds of software that's supposed to solve this project management, communication, productivity problem. So truly admire how Slack did it. So if we think how they materialize these aspects, so in terms of the sunk cost, they have provided a very intuitive user experience, right? So the time and effort that was invested in the current tools, it was very easy to switch and learn and understand. Yeah, just channel something that was very intuitive, not new concepts for the users. For adjusting the workflows, on day 1, Slack provided integration with Google Drive, with Trello, right? So don't stop your existing workflow, just communicate here. So instead of reinventing the entire workflow of the user, say, continue doing whatever you do. This is a link, this is an integration to your existing workflow. And on the financial aspect, Slack was brilliant enough to say, yeah, don't worry, you can have it for free, right? So no investment is needed on the get-go. You can learn, you can adapt, and only then the entire team can purchase a license. So if we think about, and they played with it, right? So the communication aspect was something that was existing in current tool, but it was fragmented, right? And moving to a single tool was tough. It was different. It was time consuming. So they've played both with the sunk cost as well with the switching cost to allow for very easy adoption that was, as we know today, was very successful.
Yeah, I'd love to see their formula because I come from Microsoft Teams, and if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, you get that as part of just being in the ecosystem in your enterprise or your organization. So Slack has a really hard time getting the switching cost, getting the sunk cost to get the new value. So I'm sure Slack has struggled with that because companies are like, well, I already have Microsoft Teams as part of my Microsoft ecosystem. So I would love to see their formula.
I don't think it was their original challenge because when Slack started, I don't think Microsoft had Teams. So Teams, I believe, was created after Slack. And that's an interesting point, actually, because the point over there is that some companies that were on Microsoft but didn't have a tool like Slack, they use Slack. And then when Teams were introduced, they needed to switch over to Teams. I don't know if needed is the right word, but, they might wanted to do it because it might be cheaper for them because they already own, a Microsoft license, right?
Right.
And then the question over there is what Microsoft did to help them with the move, right?
Yep.
But how the switching cost, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a great example. Thank you for that. You did mention before also a bit about B2B. And when I'm looking at the formula, I'm also thinking about how can it be applied also in different situations. So one of them is definitely B2B. You also talk mostly about companies that are building software or products for other companies. So as a startup building, a new product to sell. But I think you can also apply the formula internally if you have an IT department that build internal products for their company to see how they solve it today. What might be a new value if they create a whole new product for that. And all of those sunk costs and switching costs, they should have a better idea because they're internal to the company and they only have one client. But I've been in this seat before, building internal products, and I still saw the struggle there to create new value or to help my clients, the users in the company, understand that I can create something that will help them do the work much better. And they were still afraid of, their switching cost was psychological, mostly. For the company, it was more about training them and stuff like that. So I think that, Nat can definitely be used over there. What about you kind of touched very, very briefly on B2C. What do we do there? Is there a value there to also use it?
Yeah, I must admit that my professional experience has not been in the B2C ecosystem. I think in consumer product, it's mostly about social influence and psychological aspects rather than more materialized sunk cost and switching costs because of the one-to-one relationship with the product rather than as an organization. So I think we would need to reframe switching costs and sunk costs to things that are more related to the emotional and the social influence. People are mostly, as of today, things are viral and social networking. Adoption is on the rise. So I would need to think about how to reformulate it. I don't think the current formula is very suitable for B2C.
Oh, I see. Okay. I mean, it sounds to me that sunk cost and switching costs are still terms that could be used for B2C as well. It's just a matter of how do we formalize it and quantify it, right?
That's right.
And where the psychological and social influences are much more heavier over there than with the B2B, right? Great.
Yeah, so it sounds like the framework will be a successful tool to have for startups, but are there common pitfalls that we need to look out for if we want to implement something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it should work in conjunction with the MVP, which is to build something as quickly as possible so we can get feedback on our key assumptions, right? And the nuts should also focus on the adoption piece, not just the feedback. I think the key pitfalls would be, as I said, as opposed to what's important, what could be missed. Not fully understanding the current solution of our customers. Also, another pitfall could be not defining the true early adopters. So running too thin, trying to accomplish or to drive adoption for different types of customer segments. So when there's no match between your current resources, what you can achieve, what you can bring to the market, and your aim or strategic goal to target or to acquire different customer segments, you need this to be matched. You can only do what you can do, right? You can only be successful for something. But if you're trying to acquire or drive adoption for different type of customer segment with different requirements and different use cases, you need to pick your battles. So start with actually picking who you can deliver value to today, right? So be very focused on your customer segment. Then for this customer segment, which is reasonable that you would be able to deliver this value to drive the adoption, right? This is the value that you're looking for. Truly understand our current solution. Most companies zigzag on that, right? It's hard. It's hard to understand customers. Because customer interviews, if you don't really know how to interview customers, you will lead them with your questions because there's confirmation bias and gazillions of other biases, and then they will answer what you want them to hear. There's the mom test. Don't ask someone, is my picture is nice, right? Because of course it's nice, it's great. So avoiding misleading the customer interviews. So when you get the wrong feedback, you don't really understand the customer solution. When you say, no, there's no switching cost, they don't have something I heard from a startup, they are not switching from a different solution. This is truly unlikely, right? Unless you're in a blue ocean where there's nothing exists, nothing, okay?
Yeah.
And you're educating the market on a new problem and on a new solution, rare, but that can happen. Only then they're not switching. But if there is something, even Excel or a pen and paper, they are switching. So you need to understand. So when you're telling them they're not switching, so this is usually another pitfall. And there's sunk cost is small, switching cost is small, and focusing only on the absolute value of the new solution, without going deep in each of those 4 components.
I think that jobs to be done is very helpful here, because if they understand the job to be done for their clients, they will understand that they always had the problem because they always had the job to do it. It was just a matter of how they solved this, right? So if we're also looking at even at consumer worlds like Airbnb or Netflix, they were in people think they were in blue ocean, but they were solving problems that people solved in different ways. Before Airbnb, people used hotels, or they found bed and breakfast somehow, but they were able to find them. And before Netflix, people they went to Blockbuster and they rented the movie, right? So people, or they read a book, or they went to entertain themselves in different places. So the problem was not so the job to be done really could be a good reminder there to those founders, not to fall into this pitfall that they don't have a solution. Everyone has a solution for something. Nice.
Another pitfall that is worth mentioning is solving a problem worth solving, right? So not all problems are equal. And if the problem is not frequent, urgent, and they're already actively trying to solve it in a different way, then nice to have, you want to be a painkiller, not a vitamin, right? So you want to make sure that you're solving something that they truly want to solve, because it's frequent, urgent, and truly painful. So those are prerequisites for the NAT, right? We assume that you have a target audience, you have a problem worth solving, right? But then you need to evaluate or to define what should be the scope of the new solution. This is where NAT comes into place.
Yeah. Now, over time, once they do apply it, things are changing, the market is changing, they grow, they have adoption, they learn new things. So how often do they have to assess the NAT and see that it's still making sense, or they have to adjust it somehow?
That's a great question, and it's also something that I think about, like what should be the time frame, the frequency to reassess it. The same as product market fit, it's not a point in time that you achieve it and you're gone, right? You need to always reassess whether you have a match between your product and your market. The same goes to NAT. NAT comes into place on the planning question, right? What should be the scope when you're building your roadmap and you decide what to build, right? So every time that you decide what to build, you need to reevaluate those components, because switching costs can change and the current solution can change. So every time you need to assess it. Once they have already adopted, you need to retain them. That's a different question, right? So after the acquisition and the first adoption, when they're already starting, but now they are, they use your product 3 times and they're not coming back, you need to see what happens again, right? The equation doesn't work. True adoption is where they are retained, they are coming back, they're getting recurrent value from your product. So each time you're in a planning process, you're asking yourself, what should I build next? You need to reassess the NAT. And as you see things that are not working well in your KPIs, like activation, adoption, retention, and the KPIs that matters to your business, right? Reassess what didn't go well. It's not enough value, why they're not staying, right? So those are the places where I would recommend to reassess it.
Yeah. And it's like any other things. We know that, for example, product market fit is always a moving target. It's hard to quantify, so we have to assess it on an ongoing basis. So I would say, maybe there is no rule for it specifically, how often, but it's almost like it's a living, breathing thing that you have to be on top of all the time. Absolutely. So if you want to give to our listeners here, whether there are product managers on teams or there are startup product people, how do they start, doing it? What will be the first actionable items, other than reading everything you have written about NAT and talking with you and listening to this? what should they start doing?
That's a great question. So as I said, make sure you have defined a target audience with a problem worth solving. That's your starting point. Don't start if you don't have this. If you don't really know who you're targeting right now, don't start. If you didn't identify a problem worth solving, don't start, right? Once you have achieved that, go deep on understanding the current solution. Don't skip away. Don't say, yeah, we have a better solution. Go deep on understanding the current solution and the workflows involved. What happens before the bucket you want to solve and after. Once you have achieved that, the rest will be easier because you will have a mental model that truly, you could actually go to that company and do whatever they're doing today. You can see it. You and the person you have empathized with how they're solving the problem today. Once you have deep understanding on that, the new solution will come much easier, and the switching costs and sunk costs will be so vivid because you understand how they're solving it today. So don't skip on how they're solving it today. That will be the key, I think.
Perfect. Yeah, we do want it to be something people, will actually adopt. Maybe there is a NAT formula to adopting NAT, but but no, that's a great formula and framework that really simplify how we think about value, and you're right. I mean, MVP is always very subjective. We know how MVP these days it becomes like everyone understands it in different ways. And I've seen MVPs that were really should have been maybe the 10th version of a product rather than what they call it an MVP.
Yep.
So this is a very helpful on top of that to actually quantify things and say, are we in the right direction or not?
This is really helpful. And this is something, my key takeaway here is like, you can think about it as a product holistically, as a startup product, but I even think about it from a feature level. So like, is this feature that we're building going to be valuable to the customer? Product managers, we build stuff. It doesn't grow the adoption that you anticipated and doesn't get the traction that you hope for. And so thinking about this formula could help in that arena as well, especially from a B2B perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something that I've worked as a product leader on a feature level, not a completely new product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even then, you're solving a problem, right? So they need to move from how they're solving it today to your new solution. And you want not just to validate your hypothesis by getting feedback, you want them to adopt. You want to create traction. Not for everyone, 5 customers, right? For B2B SaaS products. So having those 5 customers truly switching and using only your new solution, your new feature, this is how you actually manifest the validation. So validation is they're using it, not just feedback. They're actually using it. So it's also switching your mind, how you think about validating your product. You want them to use, you want them to adopt, and then how you can play with what adoption means, how it can what levels do I have? This is what drove me to define the NAT.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it could also help with prioritization of new features to say this feature has higher value than another feature, etc. And in B2B, there is a lot of, because it's an ecosystem, there is never just your product, and that's the only product that people are using, unless someone is only using Excel. Then there is always also the solution. The problem is much bigger usually than what we are solving. They have other things that they have to solve, and they use in other products. And sometimes the switching there is to switch from the other product to use that part of the features into your product, or integrating the products or things like that. That many times we consider them as feature. It's a new feature of the product. It's a new way that the product can work with the ecosystem. But it definitely can help with switching costs. It can help with many sunk costs, many different things that we sometimes forget to consider.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned the value. So that's an exercise I'm going through today is value scoring. So just value scoring, prioritizing what we're going to do next on the roadmap coming up. And so
Yeah.
I think this really applies there.
Yeah, you can also consider it as a prioritization method.
Yep.
Right. Great. Other than that, are there any other products that you love to use and can to say this is my go-to product that I always love as a product person?
So I always admire a product that truly understands users. If we think about consumer products, I'm a big fan on Instagram on the way they've translated customer love and appreciation for social recognition. I think Google Documents are working very well for collaboration. So it actually tackled the challenges that we had on passing documents on desktop through email and stuff like that. So increasing the productivity level, and I use it constantly with the customers I work with. So we work online, exchange comments, and the comments and the entire product, which I think is working very well. So I think those are really cool tools that came to my mind instantly.
Interesting on that. If I try to apply that, on why people don't switch from non-collaborative products to collaborative products, that would be a really interesting, exercise to look at, because I still, it boggles my mind that people use, not that they use Microsoft Word, but that they use their personal, desktop to create a version, distribute it to everyone, get everyone to comment on it, get it back, all of this collaboration mess that is created the old way. I just don't know why people are not adopting it more. Maybe because they don't know that it exists. Maybe because they're just used to the old way and they just. But I've been using collaboration on Google Docs for at least 12 years now, maybe even the 13 years. And every time that I see people still sending me a file to give them comments, I'm like, it's a bit unbelievable. But that will be an interesting exercise to do there, to understand why people don't adopt it and what is this block that they have from this.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I'm even thinking about it from an AI perspective. I got to get AI in here somewhere, but AI, the switching cost of AI is really low right now because it's psychologically I can use different, Anthropic, OpenAI, I can use different ones. There's not sunk costs because a lot of them have really good free options at this point, but AI becomes more and more integrated into organizations and enterprises. The cost of switching is going to accumulate because really people are bringing all these APIs into their companies. So cost will eventually accumulate because it is expensive to run this. And as you integrate this into your product, it's going to become more and more costly. So the switching, I think in the long run is going to be tougher organizations, but me as a B2C, it's got to be pretty low, and the value I get from it is really high. So
I can actually speak about this.
Okay.
I switched from ChatGPT to Claude, to Anthropology.
Yeah.
For me, it was tough. It wasn't an easy path. I have invested prompt-wise, understanding how the UX work, how the interaction works. I have gazillions of chat already opened that I can get back to. So I've invested time and data and effort to understand and to learn how to communicate well and to get the value out of ChatGPT. And when I was told about Claude, and it's much better, it's much more deeper, it provides more, in-depth replies to the same prompt, I said, no, I'm going to stick with chat. It's my go-to Gen AI tool. But end of story, I switched to Claude because the net value it provided me was extremely higher than what I could have achieved in ChatGPT. They do not have migration tools. Their experience is quite intuitive. So I had meaningful sunk costs because all of my previous chats were in ChatGPT. But it's still early days. I didn't have enough investment to stop me from switching, right? But it wasn't something easy. I switch and I'm gone. Like, I'm not going to ChatGPT. Claude is my go-to now, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So I have both of them on my phone. So I've got ChatGPT, OpenAI, and Claude, which is Anthropic. So they both have an iOS application now. So I've actually gone back and forth between them. I'm getting better responses out of Claude. My switching cost is so low. I can just go to one
That's
and use it
part of
really. Yeah.
that's part of the democratization. Every
Yeah.
time that there is a democratization of specific technology, the switching cost becomes much lower.
Yep.
But I think one thing that this maybe to conclude our episode today, one thing that this can help product managers and founders is to adopt NAT, is apply NAT first on the things you're doing, on the products that give you value, and see maybe like examples like that where you actually switched from one product to the other. See what was the value of the old solution, the value of the new solution, the sunken cost, and the switching cost, and see that it made sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, this exercise with something that's really close to you and makes sense to you, I think adopting it for your products that you're building for your clients will be a much easier, because you will get this empathy that, yes, this is working. And if it works for you, it should work also for your clients, right?
Right. Yep. There's like a personal touch to it when you
It's
use
always
it.
like that. When we do something that affected us, we gain much more empathy to our clients.
Yeah, I like that a
that's
lot.
a very nice touch.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Anat. Matt, do you have any other questions?
No, I got my AI stuff in there, so I'm all good. So
this is always
I'm happy.
coming up. This is always coming up in our discussions. In the early days, it was about data analytics. Now it's about AI.
Now AI does it. Now AI does analytics now, so you don't even need. Yeah. So no, that's
exactly.
great. I got it in. So
Anat,
thank you so much.
Last night, someone told me that they use now not one generative AI, they use two always, because they take the output of the first one and they give it to the second one, and then they see what the results will. Something
I
like
actually do it as well.
I actually do that too.
I do it as well.
Yeah.
And it's a common one.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's a better. You get better results once you use two, right?
Yeah. You do some A/B testing for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. This was a great discussion. Where can people reach out to you if they want to connect with you or hear more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Anat Eldar. You can reach me out in Facebook and Instagram as well. So happy to connect and learn more stuff. So please reach out.
Perfect. Wonderful. Anat, thank you again. Moshe, thank you.
Thank you so much.
To all the listeners, and we'll talk to everybody next time.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.